Welcome to this edition of the Locker Room Chat, brought to you by the Tacoma Pierce County Sports Museum and Rainier Asphalt and Concrete, the #1 asphalt and concrete repair contractor in the Tacoma and Seattle area. For quality workmanship with top-notch customer service, contact Rainier Asphalt and Concrete at www.rainierasphalt.com and let them know that you heard about them on the Locker Room Chat. Hello, I'm Jay Strickers, your honored host for today's Locker Room Chat, and we are extremely excited to have as our guest today on February the 13th, 2024, Ron Medved, Bellarmine Prep, University of Washington, Philadelphia Eagles football star. He's also a longtime professional social entrepreneur with the Pacific Institute and a bottom line supporter of all things sports and of empowering individuals to reach their God-given potential. Ron, welcome to the Locker Room Chat.
Thanks a lot, Jay. It's nice to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here, Ron, and let's go ahead and get right into today's Locker Room Chat. We always got to start at the very beginning. You're a Tacoma guy. You grew up in Tacoma. There's a whole bunch to learn. Tell us a little bit about your growing up years, involvement in sports, academics, whatever, and how that kind of led into Bellarmine Prep. You can talk about your family a little bit, neighborhood, etc.
Yeah, you bet. I'm a South Tacoma guy, and I grew up in a home at 43rd and G Street, so a bit up the road from Lincoln High School. My growing up, my childhood, was very much centered around Lincoln Bowl and Lincoln Park and all the play fields there. I did play Little League baseball yeah, but again, I think my my early sports activities centered around my home life. I lived in a home that had 5 fruit trees in the backyard. I was very good at climbing every one of them, and as I was growing up, my from a sports point of view, my favorite sport was track and field. And this is before the NFL was really the TV thing that it is now. The Olympics every 4 years was a big deal. And so my heroes were Olympic athletes and specifically the decathlon, Rafer Johnson and especially. And I ended up building in my backyard a bit of a event park. I had a high jump pit. I had a broad jump pit. Uh, uh, I had a pole vault pit until my mom made me take it down. I caused a little bit too much disturbance. And the block that I lived there on G Street, that block that I lived on was must have been exactly 400 meters. And I swear I ran that block and I trained on that block, and I did it, as a kid just because I just enjoyed, running and all the events of the Olympics. And that really is my origin story, I think, when it comes to sports.
So let me ask you this then, Ron. Well, we know you come from a large family and kids in the neighborhood. Were you competitive in these kinds of things, all your sports, or was it kind of individual thing that you just kind of took off with on your own, or were there clubs involved, organizations that got you involved in athletics at that time?
Yeah, good question. I do come from a big family. I'm the oldest of 12 kids, and so but I was not really. I mean, I was a little bit older than everybody else, so I wasn't really competing, so to speak, with my younger brothers and sisters.
Um,
I a lot of the stuff that I did sort of by myself and with my dad. My dad was supportive. We actually had an old garage out back that my dad uh, built into that garage a basketball court, believe it or not. The basketball hoop must have been 8 feet high, and that was just perfect for me. Uh, so I can remember playing catch with my dad, and when I was learning how to play baseball, and but all the kids as they grew up, I mean, everybody found their niche in sports one way or the other, and yeah, that was by the time I went to Bellarmine. Uh, we actually moved. We actually moved again. We stayed in South Tacoma, but out to 56th and Sheridan, 57th and Sheridan, excuse me, into a bigger home. The family was getting bigger, so we needed a bigger home. And my years at Bellarmine, I was actually living in a different part of South Tacoma.
57th and Sheridan, if I'm not wrong, that wasn't far from Dave Williams, where Dave grew up.
Well, actually, I was closer to Dave, where in the 43rd and G Street home. And yeah, I should have mentioned Dave. I mean, Dave was a childhood friend of mine. Actually, we met, in Little League Baseball, and we became buddies. And and when we went to high school, the two of us, I went to Bellarmine, he went to Lincoln, and we competed against each other. But we stayed friends for all those years. I mean, he came to the University of Washington and played, and I helped recruit him. And then when we were in the NFL, we ran into each other. We had a nice reunion at the 50-yard line in Philadelphia when St. Louis and Philadelphia played each other. And we were just pinching each other, so to speak, like, how did we get here? This is this is wonderful. Uh, but yeah, Dave, Dave's a good friend of mine, and I haven't seen him in a while, but when we do see each other, we got lots of stories that we share with each other.
Wonderful. Now, before we get into Bellarmine and then UW and Philadelphia, anything else organized sports before Bellarmine Prep? What were there any organized sports, or what organizations or clubs that you belonged to that got you involved in athletics before Bellarmine?
Yeah. Well, I became a member of the Downtown Tacoma Boys Club,
Yeah.
and yeah, I got to swim there. I think that was sort of the main event, and I had to hit a swimming pool, and I used to go down there, and I used to watch uh, other older kids, and they, play and practice. And I remember I used to watch Charlie Williams, who was a
Oh,
great basketball player that played for Stadium and Seattle University and beyond. I watched him. Herman Washington was a guy that I watched play. He played at Stadium, but Herman was also a high jumper. And so when I was my track activities, I mean, I was a high jumper too. So anyway, I didn't reach some of the heights that they did in their particular events and their sports, but I mean, I certainly tried to model after them in my own way.
you bet. So you're getting to be seventh, eighth grade, getting ready to think about high school. You live in the Lincoln area. It sounds like you end up at Bellarmine. Was there ever a decision there? Were you always going to be a Bellarmine Lion? Tell us about that decision between you and probably your family too, what I would assume.
Well, coming from a Catholic family, there wasn't much decision to be made. I mean, Lincoln was non-Catholic, obviously public school, obviously, and Bellarmine was something that was always the goal. And all my siblings, went to Catholic schools, all through high school. My two oldest sisters went to St. Leo's, and my younger sister Karen did go to Bellarmine, and was quite a soccer player herself. She went on to play
Yeah.
soccer for Santa Clara. But yeah, I think yeah, I forget your original question, Jay, but
Well, let's think about this. That's fine. You're through the eighth grade. You're getting ready to go to high school. You show up at Bellarmine. What sports are you thinking about? Is it sports, academics, all the things involved there? But take us into your early years at Bellarmine, transitioning into sports, and then we'll get into your football component there too.
yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, school was a challenge, and I don't mean that it was hard. It just meant that you really needed to sort of come to school seriously. I mean, I was taking Latin courses and
Mhm.
math courses, and uh, so it was a nice challenge that way. Sports wise, I mean, again, it was kind of a foregone conclusion. I mean, I was going to play all the sports. I played all the sports growing up, and uh, I do. It was an unusual that when I was a freshman, uh, uh, because of all my track background, and again, that was all sort of that self-taught track background. I got a fast start, on the track team there at Bellarmine, and I was a uh, so much so, I mean, I had so much experience that when I got up there and looked at the high jump pit at Bellarmine, I said, "Man, this is not going to do it. This is not going to work." And I got one of the groundskeepers there at the school, and I said, "Hey, I need to make some sandbags. I need some cinder. I need some sawdust. We got to remake this high jump pit." And I'm a freshman, giving orders to people there to, let's get this track, in order. And so anyway, we did that, and you know the unusual thing was that again, I high jumped, I broad jumped, I ran the 440, uh, other things. I mean, I liked experimenting with all the different events, but the bottom line of it all is that my freshman year at Bellarmine, I earned a letter, and that was significant for me because I can remember getting that Letterman sweater for the first time, and I was the only guy in the school that had like four stripes, on their arm. I was the only one, and all I had to do was sort of look over at my arm and be reminded, that I had potential and that I, had an opportunity to do something really unique, which was to be a four-year letterman. So
You bet. Okay, Ron, now you're talking about how you had to help the school kind of get organized for you to be the track star that you became. I believe I looked at a picture where you went to a meet and didn't have all of your equipment put together before you entered an event. Maybe 100-meter, 100-yard dash at Lincoln Bowl. Can you tell us about that?
well, yeah, that photograph is me from my eighth grade experience. I don't know how I ended up going to this track meet in Seattle, but it was for all the Catholic high schools. And so I'm an eighth grader. I have not really competed very much at all in track. I mean, which means uh, they put me in the 50-yard dash, and I'm lining up with these other runners from the different schools up in Seattle, and I'm half terrified. I don't know if I belong in this group or not. I mean, it's that moment of truth where I'm on the starting line and I'm thinking, uh, do I belong here or not? Am I going to embarrass myself? And I remember that when I told you the story about the way I used to train at home and used to run around the block. I used to do that barefooted and in socks. And so at the last minute, before that race, that 50-yard dash, I took off my clunker Converse tennis shoes and threw them to the side, and I won the 50-yard dash, running in my socks. And
Ron, you're in the 8th grade when this happens,
yeah, I'm in the 8th grade.
and you're running against high school kids?
No, they're kids that are my age,
Got it. Yeah,
but they're from the different Catholic schools
sure.
in the Puget Sound area.
Got it. Yep.
Yeah, and I think the main thing is that I won it. I won that 50-yard dash by a bit. There it is, right there. You can see I'm ahead by at least several yards, and the thing that race did for me was it gave me a beginning confidence. I mean, I started at that starting line thinking with doubts and wondering, can I compete with these guys? And I finished that race and I said, I can, I can compete. And so that gave me a big boost. Again, I was just finishing 8th grade, and I was going to go to Bellarmine in the fall, and so there it is. And look at that crowd. It was really a nice crowd. I don't remember, at that age, competing in any sport with any kind of crowd that looked like that. So it was a big deal. It was really a big deal that day.
So, two things of note here. Number one, sounds like this was a true aha moment for you when you realized maybe I do have something special athletically.
Yeah, it was just the beginning. It was the beginning idea, uh, beginning confidence. I mean, it
Sure.
was sort of an instantaneous kind of thing.
Yep.
It started with a big doubt, and it ended with a big bolt of confidence.
You bet. Well, the other thing looking at this picture is we all know that shoes have come a long ways since then, either shoes or lack thereof. But
Absolutely.
yeah, 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 that's a great photo. Wonderful photo. And thinking back to that era, somebody to have taken that with that perfect stride with all three of you, that's just that's a great photo forever.
Yeah, that ended up. I think that was a reporter for uh, the Northwest Catholic
Yeah,
newspaper. Yeah, it was in the news, that their newspaper, the next
you
weekend.
bet.
And yeah,
Okay, Ron, so HR would stand for Holy Rosary, would it?
yes, it would.
There you go. Wonderful. Let's move on now. You're at Bellarmine, your freshman year football. I can't remember who your football coach was back there, but football, I assume basketball, track. Talk a little bit about getting development, then getting involved in athletics. My records here indicate maybe 10 varsity letters. Just tell us a little bit about all of that.
Yeah,
Coaches, people, teachers that you ran into there that were kind of major influencers and helped you along with your athletic as well as academic career there.
yeah, Jay. My track coach was Jack O'Laughlin, who also happened to be the football coach. And I think Coach O'Laughlin, he set me on the right path as a freshman, and especially on that track team, because I used to argue a little bit about, Coach, really, do we really have to run this 660 to get in shape for a 440? And he put me in my place a couple of times, and I learned real fast that the coach is the coach, and you're the player. But there was some upperclassmen that were a big influence on me as a freshman, and but yeah, I don't. There was no master plan really. You know how it
Mhm.
is. I just went from one sport to the other. So as a freshman, I did play some freshman football and some freshman basketball, I don't really have a lot of recollections about that. Uh, that freshman track year was a big year, but then the next year I turned out for varsity football for the first time. And you know, Jay, it was like one sport at a time. It was like one game at a time, one practice at a time. I mean, it was just a matter of kind of keeping my nose to the grindstone in terms of my training. And so, you know, when the high school career was over, I mean, yes, I ended up having 10 letters. You know, I had 4 in track, 3 in basketball, and 3 in football. And it just uh, I'm really proud of that. And
Yeah.
but it was a result of like doing the work. And again, I played with like at first a lot of upperclassmen, you know, that were good role models, and you know, that took me under their wing. And then as I sort of matriculated through the, you know, high school, you know, like when I was let's see, when I was by the time I was a senior, we had a basketball team that ended up being 18-2,
Mm.
and went to the state tournament, and ended up getting knocked off by the eventual champions, Garfield, out of Seattle. But um, you know, I guess I think about I just kind of, if I could just jump to my senior year, I mean, uh, actually my junior year, I had an injury in football in the third game. I broke my collarbone, and that was certainly a big derailment that, you know, that I had to sort of adjust to. It was my first serious injury that
Mm.
I had
Mhm.
playing sports, and so I was knocked out for the rest of the season. And uh, but I came back and had a really good basketball season right after that. So I guess that I healed fast anyway. Um, but then, you know, uh, my basketball coach, Marion Parison,
There you go. I want to
he
hear
was,
about Marion Pearson.
yeah, he was fun to play for. I mean, he was a taskmaster in terms of the way he trained us. You know, we did so many drills, so many ball drills, that, you know, our ball skills as a team were really terrific. And he was a fiery coach, you know, when it came to sort of game day coaching. I mean, and it was fun being around him because he was really inspiring. Jack O'Loughlin ended up leaving Bellarmine and going to Curtis High School to,
Mm.
you know, my senior year. And a fella named Norm Diebel came in as the football coach my senior year, and he was also a track coach. He was actually a track athlete himself, and so you know, I ended up having him as my track coach my, you know, my senior year. I got a lot of special attention from Coach Diebel. Uh, for one thing, I mean, like any running back, I was a running back, you know, on the football team. When you got a coach that likes to give you the ball all the time, you just love that coach, you know.
Yeah.
So and he pretty much said, you're going to get the ball as much as you can stand it. And he says, as a matter of fact, I'm even going to put you at quarterback once in a while. And I know you can't throw the ball very well, but all I'm going to ask you to do is roll out. I'm going to have you roll out left and roll out right. And I just love that. I love being sort of overworked, you know, as an athlete, and
Yeah.
especially as a running back. I mean, the more that I got the ball, the more that I
You bet.
sort of developed a feel for the game.
Yeah.
But that was to a great extent Norm Diebel, what he
Yeah.
did for me.
Well, there's an old saying that great coaches in football, particularly in high school, get the ball in the hands of their great athletes and see what happens. So now I got to ask you this question to see if this is true or not. My good friend Vern Harkins said that he read the Tacoma News Tribune one Saturday morning in the fall in your high school days, and it said Ron Medved 35, Mount Tahoma 0. Is there any truth to that? Did you remember that game? Can you tell us something about that? Can you authenticate what my buddy Vern told me?
Oh yeah, I love Vern. It's true. I remember that headline, and I was sort of shocked myself when I saw it. But I that was my last football game at Bellarmine, and I scored 5 touchdowns and kicked 3 extra points and missed 2 or whatever adds up to 33. And uh, that was really an important game. I mean, obviously, at that point, I didn't know really for sure myself whether I was going to be a candidate for a college scholarship or not. I sure needed a scholarship, to go to college. I mean, with the big family, I mean, it wasn't like, there was a college fund, put away for me to go. And uh, but I don't know. I think it's just so busy going to school and so busy sort of competing and practicing and turning out. I wasn't really sure kind of where I stood.
Yeah.
And Bellarmine being a smaller school, and because we were always playing these larger schools, our record was really not that great. We lost more than we won, so I didn't know if I was being noticed or not. And but after that game, and after that headline, uh, I think that's when I started learning that people were actually aware of me and that were watching me as far as possibly going on and playing ball in college.
Well, let's wrap up Bellarmine here in just a little bit. And thank you for the correction. Sounds like the score was 33-0. It's important to be accurate. From what I understand, wrapping up your Bellarmine years, is that there are 3 people at Bellarmine that have a retired jersey. John Lester, I think we've all heard that name before, Pat Galbraith, and you are the 3rd. Is that correct? And if it is correct, what was your number in high school that's retired?
Well, I don't remember a retired jersey as much as I was put into the Hall of Fame going back quite a few years,
Mhm.
but they have a special category Hall of Fame acknowledgement that the three of us, the 3 of us that you mentioned, are in
Okay.
that category.
Yeah.
And so uh, yeah, that's quite an honor. I I've never met those guys before, but yeah, we're in that special Hall of Fame category.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. So it sounds like you've had another aha moment here, getting all 33 points. You're starting to get recruited. Let's put high school behind you and go into college. Options, things you're looking at, schools that recruited you, people that contacted you. Well, what's the process then in your era of getting recruited to play college football?
Yeah, that's a good distinction there, Jay. In my era, it was different back then. I mean, you didn't have signing days, for scholarship. You didn't have announcements that were made necessarily, but I ended up getting recruited by at first and hardest was University of Oregon. That was the first place that I took a recruiting trip to. Uh, and I actually kind of committed to Oregon pretty early just because they just swamped me with kindness. I was here I am 17 years old, and they're treating me like uh, uh, royalty, and it was really kind of overwhelming. But I liked the coach down there, a guy named Len Casanova, and
Yeah.
he Catholic guy that my folks really liked that about him. I mean, he came up and took us all to dinner, and so that Oregon uh, was one. University of Washington, of course, was one that recruited me, and then Notre Dame, expressed an interest in me, and so I had three schools really that to play football. I didn't. I'd pretty much decided that I was going to play football in college, uh, even though I think I could have probably played basketball someplace if I really wanted to play that sport.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm not so sure that track and field was really a scholarship sport significantly back in those days. Yet Oregon had not yet come on, track and field wise. But anyway, uh, I got recruited by hardest by Oregon and Washington. Notre Dame, it was kind of interesting. The guy that came to see me kind of gave me the impression that you got to tell me that you really want to go to Notre Dame, and then we'll give you a scholarship. And I was a little bit put off by that. Now my mom and dad, they were keen on Notre Dame. They would have loved to see me go to Notre Dame, but the more I thought about it, I wanted to live in the Northwest. I didn't want to go, that far away from home. I wasn't ready for that, and I realized that if you go away to school, you're probably going to end up living in the region or or area that school is, and I couldn't see myself really living in the Midwest.
Yeah.
So anyway,
So
I
you've got Len Casanova, obviously Jim Owens somewhere here, and
yeah
then you got Joe Kuharich all
yeah
recruiting you.
yeah
That's
yeah.
pretty good.
Well, it was, and it's I have a lot of empathy every year for high school kids that are being recruited because it's so overwhelming. I
Yep.
mean, it's they're it's
Yep.
hard to sort of keep your bearings. I mean,
Yep.
and to know what's really going to
Yeah.
be best for you. Now, I eventually decided to go to the University of Washington. I'm glad I did, uh, and for all the reasons that I mentioned. And it was also true that at that time, the University of Washington was kind of recently coming off of two Rose Bowl wins, so
Absolutely.
they had a successful program. We had a successful program, and that was a big attraction too.
Okay, Ron, let's go into that one. So you arrive at the University of Washington. You hear some competing in track, certainly in great shape for basketball, football. When you get to the UW, tell us your first impressions now when you start to work out and train, because my memory back to that era that this could be pretty grueling. Any thoughts
Oh,
on that?
it was super grueling. I mean, but that was one of my Jay. That was I always felt like that was one of the secrets of my success was, I could really get loving that grueling training,
Mhm.
as tough as it was and as exhausting as it was. I think that the guys that excelled were the guys that really just went into it 100%, and some of it was downright cruel, by today's standards. I mean, it was but we were so fit, and then we were in such good condition that and we trained so hard during the week that by the time the Saturday games rolled around, I mean, they were like a lark, to
Yeah.
go out and actually play a football game. And when I got to the NFL, you know, I didn't have any practice that came even close to, those practices at the
Yeah.
University of Washington. Training camp was tough, because we used to train in the humidity back east when I was with Philadelphia. But the thing that I remember and that I remember fondly was just sort of bending to that tough training
Yeah.
and being and doing my best to match up with what they ask of us.
You bet. Well, if anybody ever read the book or saw the movie Junction Boys with Bear Bryant, and we know that Jim Owens went down with him in those Texas A&M days to the Junction and the training they went through. You had Tom Tips, Chesty Walker. One
Yeah.
platoon football. Yeah, you had to train to go both ways in that era. As I remember, a year since the training, the size of athletes then, did that change from one platoon to two platoon? Did the training change? What's your take in all of
Yeah,
Ron?
I played both ways as a freshman and both ways as a sophomore, and then the rules changed,
Yeah.
which ended up being platoon football, and so they had me play offense, which I was happy with. I mean, my most natural position was running back, and they could have made me a defensive back. When I went to the NFL, they made me a defensive back, but yeah, it was. I mean, I love playing both ways. I mean, and I felt, I had games where I had really good games on both offense and defense, and also I was a place kicker. You know, could I could kick a 50-yard field goal. So I just wanted all the action, that I could get, and some of my best games were, uh, when I excelled on both sides of the ball.
You could kick a 50-yard field goal, old style, Ron?
Yeah, yeah, square-toed shoe,
That's
old style,
amazing.
and
So going both ways, how much shit? I've got somewhere down there that there may have been a game when you even played every down in the entire game. Is that accurate?
well, that happened in my senior year. I did do that, and um, most of the time, though, when we were playing platoon football, is that like you would play with your platoon, you'd play both ways, for let's say like the first team would play uh, 2/3 of the first quarter, and then the second team would come in, and the first team would come off. So it wasn't like you were uh, it wasn't like you were in there all the time. You got taken out and you had your breaks. But one time when I was a senior, uh, I can't remember the reason why. I mean, obviously, we must have had injuries, and the secondary was depleted. And this is not the only time I did this in my career. I mean, I went to the coach and I said, "Hey, come on, why don't you let me play? I'll play cornerback." And I was already the running back. I was playing running back, and I said uh, I can play cornerback too, and I can do this, and I talk him into it, And so we were playing my senior year. We were playing California down in Berkeley, and yes, I played offense and defense in that game. Didn't come off the field, and that was an eerie memory that I have of like everybody is going off the field, the other side team is coming on the field. I'm the only one standing out in the middle of the field with you referees. And, I'm there with the referees waiting for for the change of sides, and yeah, I had a nice touchdown that game. I had I think like a 25 yard run for a touchdown, and played decent. I didn't play that great on defense. I can remember being disappointed that I wasn't more significant, on defense, but I did it. I mean, I played both ways.
So you were the 60-minute man.
That day I was.
Yeah, that's amazing, playing one platoon football in the two platoon world. Uh, Amazing. Believe you, your team went to the Rose Bowl, the 63 season, 64
Yeah.
Rose Bowl, playing Illinois, Dick Butkus, Grabowski. How about some thoughts of going to the Rose Bowl? It was a huge, huge event in Seattle in that era, as we all remember, because it was Husky football. We had no Seahawks. We had
Right.
no Mariners. We had no Sonics. Husky football was it. The Rose Bowl was it. Thoughts on the Rose Bowl experience, Ron?
Well, it was a wonderful experience. I mean, and even more overwhelming for a 19-year-old. I mean, I was 19 years old, and the Rose Bowl, they really roll out the red carpet for you.
Yeah.
We trained in Long Beach, California, and the city of Long Beach adopted, the Huskies. There was all sorts of parades and fanfare, Now, we trained at Long Beach State College. That's where our training camp was. And it won't surprise you that nothing changed in the training. I mean, we worked so hard. Again, it was that old school Husky hard training. It was no, you'd think, oh, you're going to the bowl game. It's going to be a little bit of a holiday. It was like anything but that. I mean, when I get together with my teammates, from that era, I mean, we always end up talking about how hard the training was for the Rose Bowl. In addition to that, uh, we're training in Los Angeles smog, old school smog. This is back before they cleaned up the air down there, and it was just miserable. So I was happy to, get that training over, and then get the game. The game was, I mean, it's just so clear in my mind, even to today. I mean,
Yeah.
Rose Bowl Stadium, 100,000 people. Uh, it's packed, and people they had folding chairs along the sideline. They had so many people in there. It was 90 degrees that day, and unusually hot. Everybody's in the stands was dressed in white. Uh, uh, it was hot on the playing field. And yeah, we were playing Illinois, and the famous Dick Butkus was on
Yeah.
that side, and we had to do some special preparation to get ready for him. Uh, just you know, he had two or three guys assigned to him every time to try to neutralize him, and we were we were ready. We had a pretty good first quarter. We scored first. We're ahead 7-0. And then our quarterback Bill Douglas got hurt. He got a pretty serious knee injury, and they took him off the field on a stretcher. And everything changed from there. We had another quarterback come in that had not played that much during the year and was a little rusty. And anyway, we sort of lost control of the game when in fact we were controlling it at the beginning. And
Yeah.
anyway, it just went from bad to worse, and we ended up losing the game 17-7,
Yeah.
and it was devastating. I mean, I just uh, I'll never forget the feeling of not being able to win that game. I was so sure we were going to win, and felt that we had prepared for it, but just injuries and events just took over. And
Yeah.
yeah, it ended up being sort of a terrible memory. But even now, I mean, I can sort of tell the rosy side of the story about, again, like all the fun and everything, going to Disneyland, and there's all kinds of events around the Rose Bowl. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's just this empty feeling, of not being able to win that game.
Yeah. Yep. Well, there you are. You got your college years pretty much done here. You're graduating, kind of probably wondering what's next in your life. Pro football is going to be an opportunity. Tell us a little bit about that. We all know it goes into our world today and the transition from college to professional football, the workouts, the pro days, the drafting. Uh, how did this all transpire, Ron, in your years when you're transpiring from a college athlete with an NFL hopeful future, in teams reaching out to you or not, and getting drafted into the NFL?
Well, again, Jay, it was quite different back in the day. I
Yes.
mean, imagine, you can imagine there was no combine back then.
Yeah.
There was really kind of a seat of the pants kind of way to evaluate a college player and was going to be an NFL player.
Mhm.
Uh, I remember Gil Brandt was a guru for the Dallas Cowboys, and he was one of the only ones that was using metrics back in the day, and uh, uh,
Mhm.
had his own opinion. His opinion of me, I heard secondhand. It was he's a really good athlete, but he's just not fast enough. And uh, there's no worse rap on you if you're going to
Oh
be
no, there's
a defensive back. And the problem is I kind of believed it for a while. It's interesting, the psychology of all of that is that as soon as I heard that opinion, I was a track guy and I was a sprinter. As soon as I heard that, I stopped training for speed. What's the use? I mean, he's the expert, and it took me. I was in the NFL for 2 or 3 years before I ever started really training for speed again. I kind of woke up to the fact that I had bought that story about myself. Uh, but anyway, again, the guy that drafted me into the NFL was Joe Kuharich, coincidentally, who was who was trying to get me to go to Notre Dame. And the thing is that this is how sophisticated the scouting was back then. I mean, he remembered me as a high school athlete, and I was one of the ones that got away. And when I first saw uh, Coach Kuharich in Philadelphia, the first thing he said to me when he saw me was, he said, "I got you." I got you. Like he had to wait, but he got me. And I think he had a special sort of liking for me, and that helps. Anything helps when you're competing for a position on an NFL team. And so
yeah,
again, I played mostly running back when I was at the UW. There was no doubt that I was going to be a defensive back, a safety specifically in the NFL. And so I had a bunch of retooling to do, between college and the NFL. And again, one of the other fortunate things is there's a certain amount of luck that has to happen for any NFL player. And if there's no spot open on the
yeah,
team,
yeah,
the odds are against you making the team. And there was a spot that was open in Philadelphia's defensive backfield that for one of the reserve safeties. And so that was my opportunity, and I had a decent preseason, with Philadelphia. And the other thing is that I was really good on special teams.
yeah.
And again, I credit the training at the University of Washington for that. I mean, you know, uh, I was trained. better than most of the guys that I was competing with, and things like blocking and tackling and covering kicks and all of that. So while I was learning how to play safety, I was playing really well on special teams, and that made a big difference.
Yeah. So Ron, just to back up a little bit here, how were you notified that you were drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles? How did that come about? A letter, a phone call, somebody come and tell you? What was that moment? And what can you tell us about when you realized you were going to get the opportunity to play in the NFL?
Well, I, after my senior year, I played. I got to play in some All-Star games. Jay, I got to play in the
Mhm.
East-West Shrine game, the Hula
Absolutely.
Bowl, and the Coaches All-American game. So
Oh,
I was around NFL scouts, and I was around other players that were headed towards the NFL. Uh, but at that time, uh, also more importantly, even is that the NFL draft was the week after the college season ended back then. It was just
hmm.
one week, and so I didn't have to wait very long, to find out, I was gonna be picked. And I guess the disappointment in all of that is that I was a 204th pick in the draft, and every player thinks he's going to go higher until he's not, right? And my buddy Dave Copay, who I played with
Oh, yeah,
at the UW, he was
sure.
down in the 49ers, playing at the 49ers because Dave was a couple years older than I was.
Mhm.
So he was already playing, and he called me up the night before the draft, and he said, "Get ready, Ron. They're gonna pick you number two." You know,
Ooh.
yeah, they're gonna pick you number two. So I'm waking up the next day thinking I'm gonna be a high draft choice, and I don't get selected the next day. I don't get selected until the end of the next day after that, and so that was
Oh,
a bit of a shock. Uh, but the the other story that's kind of a fun story to remember is that I got married one week after the final season of my senior year,
mhm.
and anyway, the NFL decided that that was a potential story for them, so they end,
Oh,
they ended up making a big deal of my marriage, and they sent a time reporter and a time photographer out to the wedding, and and put the wedding in in the magazine, uh, and uh, I don't know, that kind of hurt me more than it helped me
I bet, yeah,
in the end, because again, I'm making this kind of complicated, but back then the American Football League and the National Football League had not
sure.
merged yet, and so they were competing for players, and so I only got drafted by one of the leagues, which was the NFL, and not the AFL, and that caused me to sort of, I mean, because the NFL was featuring me in the magazine, it kind of prejudiced sort of the whole selection process
Sure.
to the NFL. And so anyway, I was a 204th pick, and but I don't really complain about that because but when I went to Philadelphia, I had every opportunity to win a spot that was there. I had a coach that remembered me fondly from high school, and I ended up making the team. Not really. I didn't. I was the last person to think that I was making the team. The competition was so stiff, in training camp, that I wasn't really sure I was going to make it, but uh, I did, and I got to I got uh, on the team and, moved back to Philadelphia and started what ended up being a 5-year career there.
5 years, 51 games, stellar career. Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about coaching then, number of people involved in the programs, kind of compared a little bit to how things are now? Any thoughts that you have there for us, Ron?
Well, I already mentioned that the practices at the NFL level, at least when I played, didn't match the practices,
Yeah.
in at the college level. It was more it was more it was more casual, and especially during the season. I mean, there was never any contact
Mhm.
to speak of between them, and that's the way that it is today.
Absolutely.
I think the thing that's really significant about the NFL is just sort of the level of quality of the players. I mean, position to position to position. I mean, it's just the competition is just so intense. And again, if you're a defensive back, you got to end up covering the best receivers, in the world. And if you have questionable speed, then it becomes a real puzzle, to try to figure out how to do well and how to survive. And so,
Yeah.
uh,
So
uh,
Ron, tell us about some of those players that were on the other side of the ball then that you had to prepare for and compete against, maybe running backs, quarterbacks, receivers.
well, the scariest guy for me, to play against was Bob Hayes, who was a Dallas Cowboy wide receiver, who was the reigning Olympic 100-meter dash champion. Uh, he was obviously the fastest guy in the league, and so you know, if you're having to sort of cover a guy like that, and there were others that were really fast. I mean, you have to say they have to outsmart him is
Yeah.
sort of obvious. You have to give them a cushion. You have to study their favorite routes, and you can't make a mistake in terms of a misstep. I mean, one misstep with a receiver like that, and you're toast. So it was a I much preferred playing running back. Playing defensive back was really high pressure, when it came, to that. But I mean, I played against,
Well,
those,
let's just go back to Bob Hayes. I mean,
yeah,
his moniker was world's fastest human, right?
yeah, yeah. And
Woo.
I made a few missteps against him and paid for it. Uh,
There you go.
but there was some
Who else do you have? You
there was
bet.
some there was some there were some great wide receivers. I didn't always have to cover the wide receivers. Uh, but Paul Warfield was a
Yeah.
great receiver back in the day, and but the tight ends that I played against, I did play against Mike Ditka, I did play against John Mackey,
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
and uh, uh, and there were I'm struggling with remembering all the names, but there on every team had
Yeah.
a good collection of tight ends and good receivers, and so um,
How
I mean,
about some running backs and quarterbacks? You got some running backs and quarterbacks you can think of you competed against?
yeah, I mean, Sonny Jorgensen. I remember
Yeah.
playing against him. I mean, I played against him twice a year. He was just super confident uh, a quarterback who could really stick it in there, even if you had your receiver covered. He'd throw it in there anyway. And I played against Roger Staubach. He was playing with the Cowboys. Uh, let's see.
How about
Fran,
running backs? You got any running backs you can think of?
I got to mention Fran Tarkenton, and the reason why I mentioned Fran Tarkenton is because I intercepted him twice.
Ah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so anyway, running backs. Oh yeah, like Gale Sayers, of course. He was, my 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 favorite running back to hate to have to play. Uh, he was so shifty. Yeah, let's see. Mm,
Well, just to be able to say you played against Gale Sayers, my goodness, that's something. Ron, do you have is there a welcome to the NFL or welcome to college football moment that you can kind of think of that stands out? It seems like every time you jump up a level like that, there's something that happens that's remarkable, and it's like, okay, kid, here's where you are now. Get ready because there's more coming.
yeah. Uh, in college, I mean, there were several moments, but I remember when I was a freshman playing in the spring game, they used to play the varsity versus
Mm-hmm.
the graduates, in a spring game, and the pros that played at the University of Washington would come back for that game, and I remember Ben Davidson, who played with the Oakland Raiders, uh, big, strong, mean
Yeah.
lineman. Uh, I had to carry the ball right over him. I mean, the play was called right over him, and I remember being a freshman and just being terrified, and that helped me because I remember that I just I, I just shot through the line, because the play was called right over Ben, and I just shot right through the hole that was right beside him. And back in the day, they used to have a fence behind the open-ended end zone
Yep.
of Husky
Mhm.
Stadium, and I think I ran 10 yards and scored. I ran through the end zone and into that fence. Behind. I mean, that's how afraid,
Yeah.
scared I was. I remember that because I remember getting ready to run that play and thinking
Yeah.
this could be the end of me. Um, that was my college moment, and then
Yeah.
uh, professionally, uh, in my rookie year, in the first exhibition game, they put me in the game, the first play of the second quarter. Philadelphia was playing Chicago. Yeah, and Mike Ditka was the tight end, and so I come into the game, and I'm one-on-one on Mike Ditka for my first NFL play, and the coaches called this unusual defense, which basically is the, the safety the linebacker that's over the tight end, which was Ditka. He runs out in the flat, and the safety, which is me, comes up and basically sucker punches, the tight end. It was an unusual defense. I say sucker punch because the tight end doesn't know it's coming. It's like a trick defensive play. So I come up and I hit Ditka. He doesn't know it's coming. He goes to his knees. The play goes the other way, and I'm running sort of pursuit, for the play going the other way. And out of the corner of my eye, I kind of feel this shadow that's coming over me. So, and I look at it, and it's Ditka. He's coming after me. He owes me one, and I got my head out of the way just in time as his elbow comes flying, past me, and he he he's he shoots onto the ground on his belly, and he bounces a couple of times, and that was my welcome to the NFL moment. Uh,
Oh,
yeah.
it sounds like fright or flight.
Oh,
You
it's
got the flight in there.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
coincidentally, I mean, Ditka ended up getting traded to Philadelphia a couple years later, and
oh,
he and I were out to dinner one night, and I told him that story, and he remembered.
oh yeah.
He started getting redder and redder and redder as I
Oh,
told him this story. Uh,
oh,
I couldn't back out of it. I had to finish it. He remembered. Uh,
yeah, that's wonderful.
yeah, but just NFL. I'm so. I mean, my greatest accomplishment in the NFL was, playing 5 years and earning my pension.
Amen.
I mean, I was in the NFL for maybe half a season before I realized that I wasn't going to make the Hall of Fame. That was not something that was going to happen. But what I could do if I, took care of business is that I could maybe earn a pension and play 5 years.
Amen.
That was the
Yeah,
sort of the
you
goal.
bet.
And yeah, I did. I played 5.5 years, and I did make my pension. And yeah, I was. Um,
That's
it was a miracle. It's a miracle how I did that.
wow. Remarkable careers at the Bellarmine Prep, University of Washington, Philadelphia Eagles in the NFL. I'm gonna close up this segment with one last question here, Ron, before we take a quick break and close up segment number one. And you've alluded to this a little bit when somebody referenced that they didn't think you had enough speed to play in the NFL. You always felt that you were a great track guy. Yogi had the old saying, huh? The game's 90% mental and the other half is physical. Your take on that, and this leads in, of course, to your career that you end up with the Pacific Institute. But your take on this mental physical component of high level athletics.
Well, there's obviously a mental side of the game, and I think it's pretty well acknowledged that there's a mental side that uh, the successful players have found a way to master. Back in the day when I was playing, it wasn't quite, so well known, and
Yeah.
for some reason, um, I guess it was from my college studies or whatever. I developed an interest in psychology,
Uh-huh.
and I'm the only player that I ever knew in the NFL that took psychology books to training camp with me. I mean,
Mm.
I really did. I would read psychology, and I was reading the kind of information that directly impacted, my performance. Uh, and um, uh, and I felt like that was one of my edges that allowed me to
Yeah.
sort of play 5 years. And so you mentioned the Pacific Institute. I mean, it took me a while to sort of find my way to the Pacific Institute after the NFL, but I had this real life experience of using psychology to sort of achieve my goals,
Amen.
and it ended up being a second career for me.
You bet. Well, Ron, it sounds like you believe in Yogi's 90% mental component here. When you're
Yeah.
taking those books, it sounds like Lou Tice is probably getting something conjured up in his mind about the future of psychology and athletics. But we're going to end this segment, looking back on your career again, pre-Bellarmine, Bellarmine, University of Washington, Philadelphia Eagles. And now you come to the point here, you're in your late 20s. Life's going to change. The glory years are behind you. You've got the rest of your life ahead of you, making that transition. And what comes next is what we're going to talk about in segment two after we take a short break here on the Locker Room Chat.